Hello viewers, I am Dr. Meetu Das and I belong to the discipline of anthropology at the School of Social Sciences, IGNOU. Today I'll be talking to you about Gandhi's views on health. Till now you have been learning quite a bit about Gandhi and what he has done in his lifetime, how popular a leader he was for all of us, and his different agendas that he has followed, which made our country what it is today. But besides the kind of political and social and economic reforms that he worked towards while fighting our colonizers, the British, he also had his interest in something that is very intrinsic to our lives, that is our diet habits. And he really propagated an aspect of our diet, which is vegetarianism. Gandhi was a staunch believer of vegetarianism, and he imbibed the entire process, this process of vegetarianism in his life, and he also influenced many number of people into adopting this form of life. So before we go into the various aspects of what he dealt with and what his concerns were, let us just try to understand why he thinks that vegetarianism is an important part of life. He believes that God has given us a body, and a body which is very important to be active, to be vital, to be of value to the person who carries this body and also to people who are associated to this person. And for this, he believes that a person has to create conditions in his body which keeps him active, positive and alive in various aspects of life. Therefore, he thinks that vegetarianism is one way by which this can be attained. An attainment which can be called a harmonious and compassionate way of living, which gives us much meaning to what and how we live our lives. Therefore, he says that if we adopt this life of vegetarianism, we need to be very strict. We need to maintain some form of self-restraint, and this has to be within us. This form of restraint that we can create has to be within us, and we should have the power to control our body and our mind to follow certain norms and rules which helps us manage this form of a strict diet, which in the process helps us to live a life which is of meaning. Though this may seem or sound to you that how can having a particular kind of food make a person what he is, or what kind of behavior this person will show. But believe me, once we progress with this unit, this lesson on Gandhi's views on health, we will definitely learn many things which will tell us that yes, what he is saying is not entirely incorrect. Yes, of course, many of us may have varied views, may have views which are different to what Gandhi has proposed. However, there is an undeniable part of it which we all will agree to, where we will say what he is saying is not entirely incorrect. So what he begins with, that one has to follow strict norms to have that kind of a life where a person makes it part of his life, where he goes around following this form of a process. To begin with, it also helped him to start off with this kind of a staunch belief, because he is of the opinion, Gandhi is of the opinion, that dietary aspects of an individual who belongs to the religion of Hinduism, it becomes an inherent part of Hindu culture. And therefore, when Hindu culture majorly talks about a moral life and a spiritual life, therefore, it helps, this dietary process of vegetarianism helps to follow a part of a moral and spiritual life. Now, other than what he believes in the Hindu tradition of living a staunch vegetarian life, he was also highly influenced by Hindu cult of Vaishnavism and also the religion of Jainism, where he saw that the people following these two forms of one is a cult and one is a religion, how they follow various forms of behavior to keep their vegetarianism intact. Now, to take this idea of Gandhi's vegetarianism forward, or his idea of how one should attain a particular kind of health or a body which is spiritually and morally strong, he had certain stages that he talks about. Number one is the aversion to the breaking of vows. What does this mean? It means that if you take a vow that you will be following a particular kind of behavior to retain vegetarianism, then you should not break that vow. If you also say that from today onwards I am going to eat something that will not include meat, then you have to have that strength in you, that power in you, that control in you to keep this intact. In fact, he has an example from his own life when he was a young man, and one of his friend had told him that by eating meat he can have a very strong body, and without telling his family, for a year Gandhi consumed meat. But later on he was he had lots of guilt in himself. He felt very incorrect that he broke the tradition that his family always followed, and that also actually somehow made him stronger to proceed with the idea of vegetarianism and his belief in vegetarianism, which became one of his main way of living his life. He also says that not just about, it should not be only about not breaking of vows that we take. It is also about actually trying to appreciate the concept of vegetarianism, the idea of vegetarianism, the kind of diet that is in it. How can we appreciate it? It's not just about eating food. It's not just about eating leaves and plants and fruits. It is also about what these particular food items give us. He says that it is not just about, Gandhi says that it is not just about fulfilling our hunger or giving us some form of taste, but it actually helps us to become a particular kind of individual. And the idea of vegetarianism, the idea of self-restraint, self-control, all are connected together. He also says that one should have the desire for a life of simplicity and self-control. When he says that, he means that if we are simple and if we have control over ourselves, we are in a position to make better decisions in life. We are in a position to help others who are in need. We are in a position to think clearly and make decisions which can help ourselves and also our families and our near and dear ones and the public in general. So, to take these points forward, he believes that all these can be attained if one follows a particular kind of health regime, and that is true vegetarianism. So, the main highlights that this lesson contains is that he had various experiments which he conducted through vegetarianism. He had many ideas which he calls diet reforms, and accordingly he talks about how these kind of reforms can help people to maintain a positive life. He talks about remedies and cures which are based on nature, natural products which can help you have a healthy life, and finally all this how it can help to make us individually achieve great things in life. He is a staunch believer that all these aspects can actually make us very strong human beings. So, this lesson that we are talking about here, where we talk about Gandhi's health aspects or points of health, views on health, or Gandhi's vegetarianism, is how did this develop? What is the background of it? And then the other aspects that this lesson also covers is the kind of faith and belief that he has on natural forms of medicine, and how this actually can help people, and his strong aversion towards allopathic medicine. And lastly, how one can experiment with oneself through this kind of dietary life to achieve health and harmony in life. So to begin with, he says that there should be self-control and self-restraint in one's diet. And if we are to, this is all Gandhi's ideas, do remember this while listening to this lesson or reading this lesson, that Gandhi propagates that if one succumbs to food like meat or milk or dietary products, then one is succumbing to weaknesses or more to tastes which can affect one's way of thinking, one's way of living one's life. So for him, it is a movement from non-vegetarianism to sattvikism or sattvic life, where one follows a particular kind of very simple form of life, including a very simple diet, which leads to self-realization of what kind of an individual one is and one can become. Now, how did he finally take aspects of vegetarianism or from various areas of his life which made him think or accept that this is the only way of life which can make us strong individuals, which can make us have self-control in ourselves? First, it was his family. His family from earlier were followers of vegetarianism, and they had strict rules in their own home. But as a young man, Gandhi had traveled far and wide. He wanted to experiment with other kinds of food, and he too had tasted, as I had mentioned already, he too had tasted non-vegetarianism, and he too lived a particular kind of life which he now is totally averse towards, and he felt that this can be done away with if we are to be connected to the ideals of our family. This is how it once first began. Then when he stayed in England, his visit and his stay in England, before going to England, he promised himself that he would stay away from wine, from women, and from any kind of bad habit that would influence his life in an otherwise manner. And he had a strong desire to live an austere life, a life of a saint, a life which generally normal human beings who are living their ordinary lives are not able to do so. But Gandhi had this strong desire, and as you can see from what you have read, what you have viewed about Gandhi, that he was successful in leading such kind of a life that he planned to or that he dreamt of. As I had mentioned earlier, he had always been following vegetarianism since his childhood, because his family themselves were strong believers of vegetarianism. And I have already mentioned the story that he had consumed meat for a year, but he was possessed with guilt, which made him promise that he will not be committing this mistake again. Now, when he was in England, Gandhi joined a movement which was already there among the English people, which was the vegetarian movement. Once he became a member, he started attending the meetings, he started writing various articles, papers on this movement and his ideas himself that he had gathered during this process of meeting various kinds of people, listening to various kinds of ideas, propagating vegetarianism, and he made it his mission that he will also himself somehow or the other propagate this idea or advocate this idea of vegetarianism amongst the public. So what he really liked here was that the vegetarian movement distinctly and clearly talked about not harming animals. They were very much against killing of animals for the sake of conducting surgery on animals for the sake of experiments, for the sake to learn new things. They were very much against this. This movement was also against consumption of meat, and since Gandhi was already trying to build a life based on vegetarianism, this movement really helped him made this idea of vegetarianism his mission. He was very much influenced by Herbert Spencer Salt's book, which is called The Plea for Vegetarianism. And he said that this idea that was proposed by Salt in his book was something that he took forward in his learnings, and which he took forward, which he finally exhibited through his writings. It also helped that the idea or the concept of Hinduism always stayed intact with him, and his religious beliefs therefore showed in his writings, which also showed in the lifestyle he had. And finally, this took him to the idea of how he tried to follow the concept of satyagraha, which he proposed. Now, he felt that the idea of satyagraha, or finding truth, ultimate truth, is through ahimsa, which most of us already know about, and the other part is about by following a sattvic life, that is, following a lifestyle of a vegetarian. Now, he said that once one becomes very simple, one has control over his diet, one immediately becomes a person who would not be violent, because he thought that he was of the opinion that violent behavior, anger, all these aggressiveness, all these are created with the consumption of certain kind of food material which is not connected to vegetarianism, and would create problems in controlling one's own way of thinking, one's own mind, and therefore would not lead to following satyagraha or following a life full of ahimsa or non-violence. So therefore, he always had a moral basis to the idea of vegetarianism. Now, he said that one should not be tempted to become a non-vegetarianism because somebody says so, like his friend had done when he was young, or on the basis of health. Because most of the time when one falls ill, doctors advise that a particular kind of soup which contains meat, or a particular kind of a meat diet might help one to get better soon. But Gandhi was of the opinion that this is all not true, and that one can attain better health and better thought process through the following of vegetarianism. Therefore, he says no to the purpose of consuming non-vegetarianism and non-vegetarian food, which he believes only makes one very weak. So it is always, one should always be thinking about the moral consequences rather than about thinking physical consequences. Because Gandhi had himself said that I would rather die than consume meat and make myself better. If I'm ill, I would rather die, but I would not consume meat. This is his idea, this is what he had proposed. He had written a whole lot of his thoughts in his books, where he talks about his experiments with diet, he talks about what kind of rules one has to follow in vegetarianism, and that one has to be the guardian of one's own body to serve nature and human beings, or other animals as well, and it includes other organisms like plants too. Now, in the context of following the moral ideas of vegetarianism, he said that food is to be seen as life, and that the human physiology, or that the human body is made in such a way that it is actually made to consume vegetarian food. Initially, he was a follower of only fruit and vegetables. He did not even include diet products which was made out of milk. He did not even include that. Ultimately, with time, accepted that since milk gives us protein, he then accepted that things like curd, other things like cheese can all be consumed, which can give you protein. He also said that lots of consumption of cereals and pulses in greater quantity can also create problems in the human body. So he was of the opinion that one should consume them in very less quantity. And in place of sugar and any kind of sweet product, he was always of the opinion that products like honey and gur, jaggery, it has better quality in them, and which should be consumed. He also had various other thoughts in terms of other kinds of food which are not meat, but he somehow or the other accepted these kind of food, but he was totally not in favor of consuming tea and coffee. He said that these only made you feel, it makes your body toxic. He of course also said that, the 5 elements of this earth, of this world, or of our lives, which is made up of, the sky, the air, water, light, fire, these things also somehow affect our body, which means that we have to breathe pure air. Now, where do we find pure air? So he says that since it's very difficult to find pure air, one has to find areas where when one can be at peace with oneself and breathe pure air, so that one can have a body which is very much in control. He also proposed that one should always drink a whole lot of water, which also cleanses the body. He says that the air, if we are able to consume air from a place which has good quality air, then it can give us peace. He said the mud from earth can be used to put on our bodies if we have some ailments, which can also help us to make ourselves free from various ailments by the use of mud, which has to be of course cleansed first and then created into a particular kind of a medicine. The heat of the sun, which hardly people does in the country, he said the heat of the sun, sunbathing, is very important and helps us, give us strength to the body. And he says rising early in the morning and taking the heat of the sun can also give us a healthy body. Therefore, all said and done, he basically was a staunch believer of natural cure, and he had immense faith in it. He was also inspired by a person's work who is called Adolf Just, and he took examples from his work and of course from his own family, and always proposed that one should follow natural form of treatment and a natural form of life, and was very much against allopathic treatment. He believed that doctors only deduce things for the purpose of gaining some kind of monetary attainment. He was therefore very much against doctors as well. Now, he experimented on himself to prove to people that that what he was proposing, the idea of natural medicine, is a very authentic idea. It was not just scientific. He said that natural remedies are equally scientific and had enough power to keep one's body strong. So he experimented with something called hydrotherapy, and he followed a person's work who is Louis Kuhn, and he said that hip baths which are given on the area of the hip, friction baths, and the use of wet sheet packs can actually help people get better from various ailments and keep themselves strong. And he also said that one can use hot water mixed with salt, iodine, which can also be of therapeutic use. He said steam has enough strength to also give, help people to get themselves better from various ailments. So all these ideas that he proposed are based on traditional means of, traditional thoughts which talked about natural forms of remedy, which are from his perspective very cost effective, and if believed, they can create wonders to the body. Other than this, he also believed that it is not just things which are there to create happiness and some form of positive rhythm to our body, but also the chanting, because he was highly influenced by his own religion and the beliefs that Hinduism has in it. He said the chanting of Ramanama can also help in curing people from their ailments. So one has to chant Ramanama quite a bit throughout the day in their everyday lives, not just when one is ill, but if one becomes habituated to chanting Ramanama, this can also help one attain or live one's life positively. He says that the human body is the abode of God. Therefore, one has to live a hygienic form of living, and more than a physical kind of healing or kind of a body that the human body requires, or the human physiology requires. He always said that the spiritual kind of healing or the spiritual kind of body, if one has, would be the best kind of a body. Now, he also said that there are 5 elements, and a belief in God. These 5 elements that we had already talked about, air, water, earth, light, fire, and the belief in God, are together amalgamated to create a body that is spiritually strong, has self-control. He was very much against the consumption of alcohol, tobacco, opium, etc., because he felt that these ruined families and the ways of thinking, people stopped thinking reasonably, and people would create therefore various mistakes which would be morally wrong, which would be intellectually wrong. In place of alcohol, he used to say that one can drink neera, which is a combination of palm jaggery and a kind of extract that is created is a drink which is a very healthy drink. And he said that if one can do away with all the vices like smoking, opium, consumption of opium, alcohol, then one can again have a very strong body which is spiritually, morally strong. So he therefore called for the complete prohibition of all these kind of food of these items, and he felt that the government was doing wrong by just prosecuting it. He felt that these should be banned completely. He was of the opinion that taxes being collected through alcohol, through cigarettes was not the way to go about. He felt that this was a wrong way the government was looking at it. He said that this was actually encouraging evil habits, and therefore he called for a total ban on all these items. He was very disappointed that the public and the government had no interest in helping people have a moral life. You may now understand that no other leader like Gandhi has ever addressed such kind of ideas in their lifetime ever. They have never thought of all this. He not only just wanted us to be free from our colonizers, he wanted us to be free from our own vices as well, because otherwise we become the slaves of our own body. So the main points that he talks about are all these, and lastly he concludes by his final, I conclude with his final idea of brahmacharya or celibacy, where he says one also has to do away with all kinds of sexual desires and all kinds of ideas like anger and passion. One should be free from all this, and one should only think about God. One should one should get married, but one should not think about procreation and physical satisfaction, but one should only think about how a friendship between two people can create a very beautiful life. Each one can help each other to create a body which is mentally strong. So all this and self-restraint, which helps to control the body and mind, are the things that can help us become stronger in our lives and make us lead a life through which we can help ourselves, our families, our friends, and everyone in public. Thank you.